Guys, I want to share a hand with you that I played in a little bit of a different way. So ace queen off here, it was the beginning of the tournament. I think that was the it was the 5k Titans. As you can see from the stacks, it has been already going on for a little bit. Maybe 10-20% of the field have already busted. We called ace queen off, pretty standard. We can 3-bet, it's fine. I think just calling is also fine. And I decided for a small check raise. And I will also share the results from the solver and why I deviate from a more game theoretical strategy here and play this kind of strategy. But I will walk you through the hand first, what happened. Decide to bet the turn again. He calls and we check the river. I will share the results in a little bit, but again, let's start pre-flop on what kind of hands we have. So we face raise first in versus hijack. Let's have a quick look here for 60 big blinds. So that's what we're supposed to do according to chip EV, but it's not really chip EV because the tournament is already going on. So you want to check this spot with real tournament ranges, basically that consider the ICM impact. And when you go into the, because it was a small field, the 5Ks usually have just 50, 100, 150 runners on PokerStars. And it's the beginning of the tournament, so let's go to 90% of the field are left. So really at the early stage. And first we're gonna have a look at chip EV facing an open versus hijack. You see that's similar the range, right? For 50 big blinds here. We can orientate ourselves on that, like 50 to 100 big blinds is not so much of a difference. But if we click on ICM, you see that there is already a small difference. And again, it's literally the beginning of the tournament. And we just call one big blind. But we see here that we fold 7% more. So a lot of these bottom combos, you're not defending. So this is where, and this impact gets bigger if you're 60% left, 50% left. You start getting even tighter with those calls. So this is something where it's worth diving into. Again, most people think beginning of the tournament is just chip EV, but just simply wrong. And especially if we take it further, defending versus 3-bets, you will see huge differences in your pre-flop ranges. Anyway, so I decided here for a small check raise. And let me elaborate. I want to show you the first sim where we're going to be playing with two different sizings. Hey guys, to celebrate the Christmas season, we're running a massive giveaway. You can enter now and win fantastic prizes, up to $500 coupons for our courses. Enter the giveaway and good luck. So especially when you deeper, you need to understand that here with 20 big blinds, when we have, let's say, pocket fives, we see bet, we get a raise, we can get the money, and he can have bluffs. If he has a deuce, we get it in against the deuce, against ace deuce, king deuce, that check jams for protection. And in case we ran into 7, we only lose 20 big blinds. But with 50 to 100 big blinds, when it gets deeper, you see you start incorporating a lot of checks. Why? Because the big blind has the nut advantage. The in position player has the range advantage because he doesn't have like the crap that we have. You see that we have way more orange hands. You see that he has way more dead hands, way more air. So that's why you want to use a small sizing. As the in position player on paired boards, you are not really incentivized to play a big pot unless once in a blue moon you have the 7, but you only have the suited combos, right? So this is something where most players just mindlessly bet everything, right? They bet everything. And of course, we also play a very aggressive raising strategy here. And we also fold very little. That's why it works so well in reality. You bet one big blind and you get them to fold probably at least 15, if not 20%. Like people are not going to be calling like all of these jack highs and 10 highs. But that's not the point. So when we revise this strategy, we assume that a lot of players just see bet their entire range on this paired board. And I force my opponent to use this because a lot of good racks are just playing this like small min bet strategy with the entire range. So when you do that and you don't use 1/3, you just use this very tiny sizing like he does with one big blind, then you can bet your entire range, right? Because the smaller you bet, the wider you can bet. The bigger you bet, the less you can bet. And against that, we want to be raising around 20%. And I force myself here to play this small strategy. Again, this would look a little bit different, and we can see that we start raising ace queen off with a very, very low frequency. But again, I wanted to raise ace queen here anyway, because as you can see, that also against my small raise, I mean, the pot is essentially 10 big blinds and he has to call 2 big blinds, right? So he has to define super, super wide. Otherwise, he's just going to get owned. So he can only fold 10% of the time. But this is also not happening. Like if people sit on queen 10 off, they fold that almost always, king 10 off. If they have like 8-6 in clubs, they're folding. 4-5, you see all these hands like 4-5 fucking suited is not calling a raise here. Also these king highs, queen highs, a lot of hands. I can see like queen 9 in spades floating, but if someone starts folding queen 9 spades 10% of the time, or like even if you just get the folding frequency up to 15%, which is very likely the case, we want to be raising, of course, way more for protection. But it's not necessarily about the flop strategy. It's more about also then continuing on the turn. So on the turn, and by the way, you also see that you have here 58% equity, right, against this range. So you have ace high, but you're ahead against this range. So even if he calls, and now I'm asking you, what do you think once he calls and he, assuming he folds only 10% of the time, what is your equity if he calls? All right, you can pause and guess for yourself. It's a good test. 8 of diamonds, and we see even against this calling range, we're still 50%, right? So we're gonna have the best hand a majority of the time. And we're really well protected by just having so many 7x that our opponent doesn't have, that I do believe we should still remain quite aggressive on this turn. And you see that the solver wants to do that once we raise the flop small. The 8 is also pretty good, like because we're going to be raising lots of 8-6, 8-5, 8-9, etc. So any 8, any 9, any 5, any 6 is pretty good. The 10-9s, Jack-9s also give us additional equity. So you see, even if you sit here on 4-5 or 4-3, you continue betting. All right. This is also really important to understand that if you sit here with, let's say we bet, let's say you sit here with ace queen, ace king, and you know your opponent can bluff a lot. You sit here with pocket threes, pocket fours. You can always insta fold them because people are not going to continue bluffing 4-3 in hearts here, or what else, like random ace 5 off. You see like how aggressive we're supposed to continue barreling just because we have so many 7x, and an 8, a 9, a 6, and a 5 are so good for us. Of course, we don't fold over pairs. There's still a chance he bets an 8, but anything worse than an 8 is just a pure fold against population. We see he's supposed to call the Jack 10 off to float these kind of hands. And again, keep in mind, we have more than 50% equity. Here we also see some like very light floats, even ace 9 off, ace 10 off, ace jack off high. Like you see how sticky opponents are supposed to be here with like a lot of these hands. The moment it gets king high, just want to be a flush draw. But when you bet 3/4 here, you can assume that people start folding, at least, even if it's a small amount, these 3s to 6s. They start folding way more ace highs if they're solid opponents, right? So that's why, for me, it makes not really difference, because even if he starts folding all of these ace-x, my ace queen will just profit so much from him folding, and I just generate the auto profit. If he's sticky, if he doesn't believe me with his ace 10 off, well, I'm value owning you with my ace queen off. So on paired boards, I encourage you, if you have your ace queen, ace jack, or even ace 10, play them a little more aggressive, take the initiative, and you will not end up in this guessing game of what am I doing, what am I not doing. I mean, ace queen off, if we play check call as the solver suggested, and he continues barreling, we would never fold anyway. But it gets very, very marginal. You see, like the EV of calling is not that great, whereas betting is actually also is showing a very decent. Wait, sorry, we raise call we in this node. So you see the EV of betting is just so much higher, and especially in later stages, just playing these spots a little more aggressive and you feel like you're always getting owned in the big blind. This is just a strategy. Again, you can argue it might not be the best GTO strategy. It might be easily countered because you will, of course, have on average like more merged hands, right? We call it merged. That means like you're playing very thin for value. You raise hands that are strong to call, but you put them in your raising range and go for thin value, if I try to explain it in very easy words. We're not playing a polarized strategy. Polarized strategy would be a 7 and air, like a 9-3 suited or a 6-5 with a bit of a draw. But we also have ace queens here. We might have an 8, so we raise very thin for value. And especially paired boards against late position where ranges are really wide, that's where you want to push your equity. Pushing equity means here, I want to push my 50%. I want to protect that equity and even get caught by worse. So this is, of course, sometimes where then I think we had the jack on the river. Then we need to be careful. Once he calls again, our equity drops significantly. And that's totally fine. This is where we just give up our hand. But we see here, we put in the money where we had the best equity. But also, I mean, of course, if we check call the flop, he would continue barreling the turn. We check call again. So it will be the same outcome, right? But if he has like king 5 and we make him fold on the turn, that's great, right? Also on this run out, you see we freeze the action, right? Whereas when we don't raise the flop, we go and he might value bet the jack on the river. Yeah, he's supposed to value bet a jack. And against that, we're actually supposed to hero call some of our ace highs. So you never get in that situation and being in the guessing game, making a stupid hero call if you put more of these hands in your raising range. And especially in these days where people just mindlessly c-bet 1/3. We can also go back to the other sim. Let's assume someone bets here, again, pretty small. I mean, even have half, what do I have here? And a half pot size. I wanted to see a very small sizing and a half pot. And if you have bigger raises, so let's say you bet 9 and we raise to 45. I mean, we invest 45 to win 71. And you see also here, right, how freaking wide he's supposed to defend. That's just, I think, very unrealistic. I don't think people call like these kind of hands so often. It's again only 26% folding. So raising in general on paired boards where people like they're not checking back like king 10 or ace 9 here as often as they're supposed to, and this makes it very easy to exploit. They might float the flop, then you might get these calls, but I would always double barrel this board a lot just because they bring too many hands, and you will get all of them. If they slightly overcall the flop, again, continue on the turn, and it doesn't really matter what kind of hand you have. You will just essentially protect your hand much better, get value from hands. Also here, if he has ace 9, he will call twice. You might think, what if he has aces or kings? Are we not losing more money? Well, the thing is also, you would call the turn again with ace queen anyway, right? So like you lose the money against the hands you're behind anyway because they continue betting. It makes no difference whether you raise. Maybe you lose a few more chips because you raise, the pot is a bit bigger. But even if we call the flop, it's going to be 8 big blinds on the turn. Very often when people bet that small, you face an overbet, you call. So you actually lose the exact same amount of chips because we're not overbetting the turn. So keep that in mind, and you will charge hands, now a king queen, a king jack, an ace 5, that will very likely check back the turn, right? So you get these calls, and again, since people bet these hands too frequent, you will have an auto profit spot. Auto profit means it doesn't really matter what kind of hand you have, just because he's folding too much. He's folding, like as you said, he's supposed to defend 75%, but given that their range is too wide, too unbalanced on the flop, they carry too many hands to the turn, it means our investment will yield a greater reward than according to the game theoretical optimum, where we would technically only get folds 25% of the time, but we get folds 30, 35, if not even 40% of the time. So we just have this auto profit over and over and over again. And especially later stages of tournament, like imagine this is like a 30, 40, 50 big blind spot where a lot of money is at stake and you're being the aggressor and people just bet small, bet small, bet small. Risk a little bit more. It's a great risk reward ratio. That's why we want to be aggressive. And then if you're also being seen here with hands you're not supposed to have, or they consider you as aggressive, well, then next time you get paid out with your 7s. The bigger the pot gets, that's where we really want to define our range more around the 7x, right? We don't want to jam then on the river something punty because we calls twice. He's very like an overpair. People don't hate folding overpairs. So being aggressive on the flop, being aggressive second barrels works well. People are way too unbalanced with their flop strategy. and this is easy to punish on the flop or then on the turn. And mix it up. Don't just always raise the hands like some draws. You can also mix in a lot of ace highs. Works really well against that unbalanced range. I hope I was able to help you with the out of position game a little more, especially playing from the big blind. It's sometimes tricky, and this will definitely improve also your non-showdown winnings.